Welcome to Reimagining History, where voices from the past have a story waiting to be told. Tonight, we stand at the edge of a battlefield, Gettysburg, 1863. Abraham Lincoln rises to honor the dead, but his words must somehow heal the living. What burden weighs on him as he searches for words to bind a bleeding nation's wounds? This is Abraham Lincoln, Words That Healed a Nation.
Imagine stepping into a time when every decision could alter the fate of a nation. A time when hope and despair walked side by side. Tonight, I invite you to journey back to one of the most pivotal moments in American history. As you watch, let the weight of the past mingle with the present, reminding us that even in our darkest hours, the spark of freedom never dies. Before we dive into the heart of the story, allow me to paint a picture of the era. The nation was in turmoil, a land torn apart by civil strife and saturated with sorrow. Families were separated, communities divided, and the very essence of what it meant to be American was being questioned. In this turbulent time, leaders were called upon not only to govern but to mend a shattered spirit. And among them, I would soon step onto a stage to deliver my now famous speech. 272 words. That's all I wrote. But those words would echo through centuries. I am Abraham Lincoln, and today I'll tell you the real story behind the Gettysburg Address, including the careful deliberation that went into crafting it. The nation was bleeding. Gettysburg had left 50,000 Americans dead or wounded just months before. Brothers killing brothers. Sons lost to mothers. When I received the invitation to speak, I was not even the main orator, merely an afterthought to Edward Everett's 2-hour speech. What history doesn't often tell you is the weight of responsibility I felt in those days leading up to the ceremony. I spent careful hours in the White House, drafting and redrafting, knowing these words needed to heal a wounded nation. Many wondered if such a short address could do justice to such a momentous occasion. But sometimes, the deepest truths require the fewest words. The journey to Gettysburg was heavy with meaning. Every mile took me closer to where so many had given what I would later call the last full measure of devotion. I carried with me not just the speech I had so carefully prepared, but the hopes of a divided nation yearning to be whole again. When I finally arrived, I saw thousands gathered, many still mourning their dead. The air thick with grief and the lingering smell of autumn. Edward Everett spoke for 2 hours, eloquent, detailed, passionate, and then it was my turn. I slowly walked to the podium, and this is what I said. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. You may have heard of this speech, but what you don't know is what I saw as I delivered it. Widows in black, children without fathers, a nation wondering if democracy itself could survive. My words weren't just about honoring the dead, they were about saving the living. I'll tell you something I've never shared. When I finished speaking, the crowd was silent. I thought I had failed. I turned to my friend Ward Lamont and said, "That speech won't scour," meaning it wouldn't stand the test of time. I've never been more wrong about anything. In your time, when I see people question whether democracy can endure, I wish I could remind them. Government of the people, by the people, for the people has survived far worse. But it requires something from each generation. Dedication to a cause greater than themselves. Those 272 words weren't just about a battlefield in Pennsylvania. They were about an idea, that all men are created equal, and that idea is always worth fighting for. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. And remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about why it still matters.